So, good evening, dear students. Welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, UPSC Mains 2024 Gender Studies Paper 2 Analysis. So, in the previous sessions, we have completed Gender Studies Paper 1 Analysis, and mostly we'll finish this Paper 2 Analysis in one more session, right? So today we have a few more questions from General Studies Paper 2, and we'll try to discuss them, we'll try to analyze them in a very detailed manner so that we'll understand the trend of the questions, that how UPSC has been asking these questions, and we would also try to understand, we'll also try to discuss so how to structure the answers, how to develop the framework of the answers right from the introduction up to the conclusion, including the body part of the answer, and how we can approach this answer in a manner that will help us score good marks in the examination, right? So because mains is a very important stage of the overall civil services examination, and mains marks will ultimately decides your rank in a final list. So therefore it is very important that you have to have a strong skill in terms of interpreting the answer, interpreting the questions in a correct manner, and writing the to the point and specific answers. So you could get that particular skill by looking at the previous year questions and linking the syllabus topics with the previous year questions, and how UPSC has been asking those questions, and how to develop the structure and presentation of those answers. You have to have a strong skill on all these areas, so that would certainly helps you write best answers, right? So we'll start this discussion by the first question. This question is about the democratic governance in India and the civil services. So it is very important that civil services should always be empathetic, it should be neutral, it should be impartial, it should be non-biased, it should be objective. So these are some of the values that the civil service usually possesses. Now in a democratic setup, India is one of the largest democracy in the world. So the question is, the doctrine of democratic governance make it necessary that public perception of the integrity and commitment of the civil servants becomes absolutely positive. Now in recent times, what has been happening, civil services or civil servants are being viewed or there has been a growing negativity against the civil servants. So particularly because of some factors such as lack of reforms, resistance to change, the status quoist nature of civil servants, and babu culture, which is highly or widely prevalent into the civil services, instances of corruption, lack of transparency and accountability, and very often these civil servants are not accessible to people, and they very often failed to deliver their constitutional roles and responsibilities, and all these factors have been resulted in developing the negative perception on the civil services as a whole. So in the doctrine of the democratic governance, so this particular doctrine of democratic governance, or governance that is carried out in a democratic manner, so this democratic governance make it necessary that the public perception about the integrity and commitment of the civil servants becomes absolutely positive. So ultimately the governance or the civil services in India should be in conformity with the democratic governance structure or the doctrine of democratic governance, and that is what we have to follow in this context, right? So this question has a proper approach. When you look into the approach, first and foremost you have to introduce this answer by defining what is doctrine of democratic governance. You have to introduce this definition of democratic governance, and then discuss the factors which creates negative perception on civil servants. What are the factors which have been creating the negative perception on civil servants, and then you need to mention how the doctrine of democratic governance make it necessary that public perception of civil servant is absolutely positive, and ultimately you need to conclude the answer by suggesting other appropriate measures that could enhance the integrity and commitment of the civil servants. And this is how you have to broadly divide the question, or you have to broadly structure this particular question, and then write the answer for this question. Now whenever you write the answer for this question, make sure that you write these headings before starting each part of this answer, so that would ensure that your answer has a proper structure, and it also makes your answer has a good presentation as well, right? So first and foremost, we'll try to define what is the doctrine of democratic governance. So India is the largest democracy in the world, so there is no doubt about that, and Indian constitution has also provided for the parliamentary form of government or parliamentary democracy. So doctrine of democratic governance is a governance which is carried out in a democratic form. So that is doctrine of democratic governance in a very shortest form. So doctrine of democratic governance emphasizes that crucial role that public institutions, there are a lot of public institutions, and these public institutions provide appropriate public services or delivery of the public services. That is the key role and responsibility of these public institutions, right? So this doctrine of democratic governance emphasizes on crucial role that the public institutions usually provide in upholding certain democratic values, and then they would serve the citizens. Now when I say that these public institutions uphold democratic values, now what are those democratic values? Such as equality is a democratic value, justice, particularly social justice, is a democratic value, and liberty, individual liberty, is a value, right? So these are certain the democratic values, and apart from that, the secularism, socialism, integrity, so all these are part of the democratic values of our country. And in fact, these public institutions, by upholding these democratic values, they also serve the citizens, such as doorstep delivery of services or providing other important and essential civic services to the citizens, and that is the responsibility of these public institutions. And in fact, civil servants are considered as a steel frame of India by Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. So he was the first Home Minister of India, and in fact, civil servants are also considered as the backbone of all these public institutions which uphold the democratic values and which also serve the citizens. And in fact, civil servants also play a pivotal role or a very important role in this process of upholding the democratic values and also serving the citizens without any partiality or without any biasedness, right? So as of now, there are a number of factors which have been creating the negative perception on the civil servants. So we need to understand those factors. Now, what are the factors which have been contributing to the negative perception on the civil servants? So in fact, as I have already told you, there are certain basic or generic factors which have been contributing to the negative perception, such as there are instances of corruption within the civil services, and apart from that, there is a babu culture which is prevalent within the civil services, and civil servants are very often not accessible to the general public, not accessible to the public. And apart from that, there is lack of transparency and accountability. Transparency and accountability. And status quoist nature. Status quoist nature of civil servants. And they are very often resistant to change. Resistant to change, right? So these are some of the factors which have been contributing to the negative perception about the civil services, civil servants, corruption, babu culture, and they are not accessible to the general public. Their lack of transparency and accountability in the services provided by these civil servants, and the status quoist nature of the civil servants, and resistant to change. They don't want it to change themselves. They don't want it to change or reorient the organizations and the institutions. Now, apart from these factors, these are basic factors, but apart from these factors, as of now, civil services has been lacking the professionalism which is required in a changing nature and character of the governance and the needs of the people, right? So lack of governance and lack of adequate training to make sure that these civil servants are adequately trained and guided. And apart from that, there is also poor capacity building within these civil servants, and this is one of the major factor in creating negative perception about the civil servants. And apart from that, an ineffective incentive system, and that does not reward the meritorious and upright civil servants. Now imagine that there is an institution, there is an organization, and within that particular organizations there are some civil servants who are meritorious, there are some civil servants who work hard to uphold these democratic values and also serve the citizens with honesty, integrity and probity. But as of now, the institutions or systems are like that these honest and meritorious upright civil servants are not properly incentivized or rewarded, so that over a period of time discourages these honest civil servants to perform better. So that is another factor that has been reducing the efficiency, the overall efficiency of the civil servants. And apart from that, rigid and outmoded rules and procedures that do not follow the civil servants to exercise individual judgment and also perform efficiently, right? So as of now, if you look at the rules, these rules are very often considered as rigid rules, and rules have to change, laws and rules have to change with changing societies, with changing needs of the societies and administrative structure. But as of now, the rules and procedures are very rigid, that these rules and and laws and procedures, they do not allow the civil servants to exercise the individual judgment, and that is very important in some instances. And apart from that, very important, there is lack of accountability and transparency in the procedure and the way they are delivering services, and the way they are serving the citizens. And in fact, there is also no adequate protection available for the whistleblowers in case of a corruption within the organization, within the institution. In case of any wrongdoing taking place in any organization, there are certain employees who blow the whistle of this wrongdoing, corruption or any other thing. So there is lack of strong or adequate protection against these whistleblowers is also one of the challenge. And political interference has also been causing arbitrary transfer of officers and insecurity in tenures as well. And apart from that, there is also erosion of ethics and values, which has caused a rampant corruption and even nepotism as well, right? So there has been erosion of ethics and values as well within the civil services, and the erosion of ethics and values, lack of honesty, lack of integrity, probity and lack of values among the civil services have resulted in the corruption and nepotism across the civil services. And then in the next part of the answer, you need to mention how this doctrine of democratic governance would make it necessary that the public perception of civil servants is absolutely positive. So as I have already told you that what exactly is democratic governance, in the definition of democratic governance we have understood what is democratic governance. So democratic governance, so it essentially means that upholding the democratic values, right? So it means upholding democratic values and then serving citizens, right? So serving citizens and upholding the democratic values would mean the democratic governance. Now how this democratic governance would make the civil services, the perception of public about the civil servants would make absolutely positive. Now democratic governance very often ensures fair and efficient implementation of the policies, schemes and programs. For example, imagine that the government has launched various programs for the benefit of weaker sections or marginalized groups. Imagine that there is one program which is Mudra Yojana or Ayushman Bharat program, or even Mahatma Gandhi National rural employment guarantee scheme, right? So these are some of the welfare schemes and programs which are being launched by the government, right? So when the civil servants are upholding the democratic values and they are serving citizens with a true spirit, and they are serving citizens with utmost honesty and commitment, so that would ensure these policies that are being launched by the government would be implemented in an efficient and effective manner without any gaps. So there would not be any gaps in the implementation of these schemes and programs, right? So therefore this democratic governance would make sure that the policies and the schemes are implemented in a very efficient and effective manner, and the gaps would be bridged in an effective manner, leakages would be prevented, and even corruption would also be arrested. And secondly, they also help in maintaining the public trust in government institutions, and that would result in public participation in the governance process. So remember that we have a 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, and one of the key objectives of 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act is either participatory democracy or participatory governance. Participatory democracy and participatory governance. So these are the key objectives of 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act. So don't you think that the democratic governance would ensure the participatory democracy and participatory governance across different levels, particularly at the grassroots levels in the government? Now when citizens are actively participating in the governance process, they also question the government processes, government procedures, and they also starts demanding more transparency and accountability in the government rules, processes and procedures. And that is one way where citizens would question the government, citizens would also unearth corruption, right? So in fact this is one of the way through which initiatives such as social audit, citizens charter, so everything would be demanded by the people to arrest corruption, and that would over a period of time leads to the Sevotam model of governance as suggested by the Second Administrative Reforms Commission. And thirdly, it would also uphold the rule of law, and it would also protect citizens' rights as well. So I hope all of you knew that Indian Constitution Part 3 has provided for the fundamental rights, and these fundamental rights are provided for the citizens, and in fact these fundamental rights also refrain the state from interfering in the rights and liberties of the people, right? So they are certain protections extended to the citizens against the state. So therefore now whenever the civil servants are complying with the democratic governance rules and norms, and don't you think that that would ensure a rule of law and citizens would be law abiding, and at the same time it also ensures or protects the fundamental rights of citizens in an effective manner? And in fact the democratic governance would further enhance the trust, confidence and respect among the people about the civil servants, and that is the essence and that is the foundation of citizens actively complying with the laws that are being formulated and even the regulations across different parts of the governance structure. And in fact citizens would start respecting the rule of law which is in place. Citizens would also follow their fundamental duties. Citizens would also respect the fundamental rights of their fellow citizens, and also they develop a strong respect for the governance process as a whole, and that would over a period of time strengthen democracy, and strengthened democracy is the need of the hour for India. And in fact it would also improve the government citizen relationship, and that is also a very important aspect when it comes to the better implementation of the government schemes, government policies and programs. And it would also foster the sense of civic responsibility among the citizens. So you could also write examples along with these points. You could also write some data as well, and you could also explain these points as well. So that's how you could score more marks, right? So when you present examples, data, and when you elaborate these points within the word limit, so in that case you would score a very good marks. Now there are certain measures, and those measures have to be followed in order to improve the public perception of the civil servants. Now what are the measures that have to be undertaken to further improve the public perception of the civil servants? And in this context, as I have already emphasized, that transparency and accountability in civil servants or civil services is very, very important. But as of now, within the civil services, transparency and accountability is lacking in processes and procedures. So in this context, there should be a stringent accountability measures within the civil services, such as there should be regular audits, reviews, and that ensure civil servants remain answerable to the public for their actions, and they also uphold their high ethical standards as well through a stringent accountability and transparency measures. And in fact, civil servants should also be adequately trained in ethical leadership, and when it comes to the ethical leadership, focus and attention must be given to the values such as impartiality, service, public welfare, and that would positively influence the public perception as well. And in fact, the digital governance initiatives such as e-governance would further help in reducing the bureaucratic discretion, corruption, and that would also foster a transparency and positive public perception as well, right? So these are the measures that have to be undertaken in order to further improve the perception of the people about the civil servants or the civil services. So you could also go through these flow charts. Now, what is the role of a civil servant in a democracy? So when it comes to the role of civil servant in a democracy, remember that this question has been asked from the governance section of the gender studies paper 2. And in fact, previously UPSC has been asking questions on role of civil servants in a democracy. Now when it comes to the role of civil servants in a democracy, so they have a huge role in administration, welfare services, policy formulation, administrative adjudication, policy implementation, and even a stabilizing force during the political unrest. So these are the major roles and responsibilities of the civil servants in a democracy like India. And within the civil servants, there are certain values which are considered as the foundational values. So in order to make sure that the public perception is positive for the civil servants, civil services or the civil servants must be confirmed with these foundational values. They include inclusiveness, objectivity, stewardship of public resources, respect for the rule of law, courage of conviction, accountability, tolerance, transparency, accountability. So these foundational values are very, very important, and they are essential in this context, right? I hope you have understood what is democratic governance and what are the factors which have been leading to the declining the positive perception on civil servants among the people, and what should be done. So the next a very important question, remember that when we discuss gender studies paper 2, so gender studies paper 2 has the syllabus topics such as governance, social justice, international relations, Indian polity and constitution, So broadly, these are the syllabus topics from which UPSC asks questions, right? So you have to prepare from this part. So this is the question from the international relations. We also knew that from international relations section, UPSC at least asks around 4 to 5 questions every year. So 4 to 5 questions are being asked from this part, and in fact the majority weightage is given to Indian polity and constitution. Around 8 to 9 questions are being asked from this Indian polity and constitution portions as well, and remaining questions are being asked from governance and social justice. And within governance and social justice, majority of the questions are being asked from the social justice portion, and remaining questions are from the governance. So previous question that we have discussed is from the governance portion, right? So this is the question about India's growing relations with the West, particularly the United States and Europe. So in the backdrop of growing tensions between India and China, right? So recently there have been growing tensions between India and China. Now, what are the reasons for growing tensions between India and China? There are certain reasons. India and China have the border disputes across line of actual control. So both countries have the border disputes. And secondly, growing Chinese dominance in the Indian Ocean region. Dominance of China in the Indian Ocean region. And apart from that, so there has been a growing dominance of China in the India's neighborhood. India's neighborhood. And apart from that, when I say about the border disputes, we all knew about the Doklam clashes and the Galwan conflict between India and China. And when it comes to dominance of the Indian Ocean region, so China has come up with string of pearls policy, strategically string of pearls policy, so to strategically encircle China. And within India's neighborhood also, Chinese growing dominance is a cause of concern for India, particularly China-Pakistan axis through China-Pakistan economic corridor, which has been passing through the Indian territory of Jammu and Kashmir, and that has been clearly violating the India's sovereignty. So despite India's concerns, so China and Pakistan economic corridor is constructed across India's territory of Jammu and Kashmir, which is Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So therefore there has been a growing influence of China across India's neighborhood and in the Indian Ocean region as well. So because of all these threats that India has been facing from China, in nowadays you could see a clear policy shift, a foreign policy shift from India, is that India is moving closer to the West, particularly US and Europe. So one factor which has been, or the factors which has been bringing West and India together, is that the common interests that these two countries have. When I say common interest of the West and India, is that a threat of China in the Indo-Pacific region, and secondly they have the shared values. Now what are these shared values? Free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific is the shared value of the West, US, Europe and India. So we have the common interest and shared values. So those are the factors which are bringing India very, very close to the West. And in fact, as I've already told you, how China has been threatening India's dominance in the region. And in fact, it is very important that India has been maintaining a very close ties with the West, particularly through initiatives such as quadrilateral security dialogue. I hope all of you have the basic understanding about the Quad. You have basic knowledge about Quad. So Quad is a security grouping of 4 countries which are having the common interests and shared values in the Indo-Pacific region. So please mention what are the countries of Quad grouping in the comment section. right? So when it comes to so first we'll try to read the question. Question is, the West is fostering India as an alternative to reduce dependence on China's supply chain and as a strategic ally to counter Chinese political and economic dominance. Now explain the statement with examples. Now you should not just explain the statement, but you should also give appropriate examples along with the points in order to substantiate the content in your answer. So this question has an approach. So what should be the approach of this particular question? Now when it comes to the structuring of this question, first and foremost what you have to do, introduce this answer by briefly mentioning about India's relations with the United States and growing India-China tensions. So you could briefly explain that, both dimensions of the question in the introduction itself, and then discuss how US and Western countries looking at India as an alternative to China. So how those countries have been perceiving India as an alternative to China, and then in the next part of the answer mention how India along with the West countering China's influence in the Indian Ocean region through initiatives like Quad, and conclude the answer by suggesting other appropriate way forward for India in the backdrop of growing India-China tensions. So that's how you need to have a proper approach for this question. And in the introduction, so as I've already told you that you could briefly write about the India-China tensions and also the growing closeness of India to the Western countries. Now over the past few decades, what has been happening is that China has emerged as a global manufacturing hub. So we all knew about that because China is now an economic powerhouse. China became an economic powerhouse primarily because of its export potential. First, it became a global manufacturing hub, and it started looking for the markets across the world. It started exporting its goods at a competitive prices, and China over a period of time emerged as an economic powerhouse because of the global manufacturing hub, right? And it's a major economic power. However, in recent times, what has been happening is that West is seeking China plus one strategy. Now I'll try to explain what is China plus one strategy. Now if you look at the major companies of the world, whether the companies of South Korea, Japan, Europe and US, so most of these companies have established their bases in China, right? So they have established their manufacturing bases in China. For example, Apple. Now Apple has a strong base of manufacturing or assembling the Apple mobile phones or other devices in China. Now however, after COVID-19 pandemic, what really happened was that there was a supply chain resilience. The supply chains were disrupted after the COVID-19 pandemic. Supply chain disruption. So supply chain disruption took place after the COVID-19 pandemic, and this supply chain disruption impacted the global economy, and this impact on global economy has led to the global economic recession. So in order to avoid another supply chain disruption in case of any political, economic or healthcare related risks, what the world, particularly the companies which are having their particularly companies which belong to the West, so they have come up with this China plus one strategy. So that means shifting out of China to other competitive economies in the South Asian region where there is adequate skilled labor force or workforce. There has been a technology, there have been incentives from the government to establish these units. So that particular strategy is known as China plus one strategy, and many many of these companies are coming back to India, and they are also establishing their bases or shifting out of China to establish their manufacturing bases in countries like Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, so all these countries. So that particular strategy is known as China plus one strategy. So coming to the introduction, recent times, particularly after the COVID-19 pandemic, now what West has been doing, West is seeking China plus one strategy, and in this context, India is being fostered as a strategic ally and an alternative to Chinese supply chain, right? So because India is a country which is not part of the Belt and Road Initiative. That is one thing that we need to understand. So India is not part of the Belt and Road Initiative of China that many of India's neighbors are part of, except Bhutan. Remember one thing, that Bhutan never joined the Belt and Road Initiative as of now. So Sri Lanka is part of it, Nepal is part of it, Bangladesh is part of Belt and Road Initiative of China, but India is not part of the Belt and Road Initiative. And in fact, India has been strongly fighting back against the Chinese aggression at the line of actual control and even in the Indian Ocean region, and because of that reason, West is looking to work with India, which could potentially stop Chinese aggression. So that's the one reason that West has been looking India as an alternative to China, and this is a golden moment for India that India has to use it in a wiser manner. Now next, you need to discuss how US and Western countries, particularly European countries, looking at India as an alternative to China. So this would be the next part of the question that we need to talk about. So I hope all of you have a basic understanding about the Indo-Pacific economic framework, which is being led by US, and in fact it is an economic grouping of the countries in the Indo-Pacific region. So most of the countries in the Indo-Pacific region having the common vision and shared interests, or shared vision or common shared vision and common interests. It's, for example, India is also part of Indo-Pacific economic framework, so that is being led by US. So this Indo-Pacific economic framework, as I've already told you, that it is a United States led economic initiative, and in fact this includes India among its 14 members. So Indo-Pacific economic grouping is a 14-member grouping. So this is a 14-member grouping, and within this particular group, India is also part of, and this is an economic grouping. And in fact, the overall objective of Indo-Pacific economic framework is that to enhance trade and commerce between all these countries in the Indo-Pacific economic framework, improve the supply chain resilience, and also promote the fair trade practices. So remember that China is a global manufacturing hub, and it is also an economic powerhouse. But on the other hand, all these 14 countries have a lot of potential in terms of bilateral trade and commerce, supply chain resilience, fair trade practices. And even China is very often accused of promoting unfair trade practices. USA used to accuse China very often, and India also used to accuse China very often in this context. So you need to remember one thing, that China is not a member of Indo-Pacific economic framework. Rather, as I've already told you, all the countries in the Indo-Pacific which are having the shared vision and common interest. So when I say the shared vision, free, open, inclusive Indo-Pacific region, right? So this is Indo-Pacific economic framework, and in fact, initiatives like Indo-Pacific economic framework would foster innovation, and it would also develop technology among all these member countries, and the technology and innovation would be shared. They are very important and critical for further giving a fillip to India's position as an alternative to China in sectors like semiconductors and artificial intelligence. So I would like to provide some interesting data with respect to the artificial intelligence. So it is expected that by 2027 and 28, artificial intelligence would reach around $200 billion of global market value. And in fact, India is a country with a huge potential for the development of artificial intelligence industry. And as of now, semiconductor industry in India is also in an infant stage. So therefore, it is also very important that India should also adequately focus on attracting a lot of investment from other countries who have the expertise, such as US, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, so they can come and invest in India's semiconductor sector. So that is very important for India's overall economic rise. And apart from that, both India and US have some technology and innovation initiatives, particularly initiatives such as ICT. So initiative for critical energy technologies, right? So this is an initiative for critical and emerging technologies. So I would initiative for critical and emerging technologies. So this is an initiative for the critical and emerging technologies between India and US, and this initiative aimed at developing the semiconductor manufacturing capabilities in India, enhancing the technological independence. And in fact, Western nations are increasingly looking to invest in India, right? So because Western countries and the companies which belong to the Western countries are now following the strategy of China plus one strategy. So therefore, most of these Western countries are looking to invest in India, and they also wanted to establish manufacturing bases, and they also wanted to reduce reliance on Chinese supply chains as well. And in fact, as I have already gave you examples in the beginning, that US companies such as Apple and Microsoft, so they have expanded their operations in India, and they are also setting up production facilities to diversify their supply chain resources as well. And then in the next part of the question, so you need to mention how India along with the West, particularly US, countering China's influence in the Indian Ocean region through various initiatives, right? So for example, when we say about the initiatives which have been launched by India and West, so one very important initiative was quadrilateral security dialogue. I hope you knew about the members of quadrilateral security dialogue. So US is part of the quadrilateral security dialogue, Japan is a member country of it, and Australia is also part of it, and India. Remember that all these countries have the shared vision and common interest, and because of that reason they have come together, they formed a quadrilateral security dialogue to deal with the common threat of China, to deal with aggression of China. So right, so in fact, quadrilateral security dialogue focuses on ensuring free and open Indo-Pacific region. So remember that I've told you that what is the shared vision of all these countries in the Indo-Pacific region, so which have come together, they formed Quad. So the shared vision of these countries is free and open Indo-Pacific. Free and open inclusive Indo-Pacific. Free, open, inclusive Indo-Pacific is the objective of all these countries. And in fact, the quadrilateral security dialogue partnership between all these countries emphasizes on maritime security and also economic collaboration. So maritime security and economic collaboration are the basic objectives of the quadrilateral security dialogue. And when we talk about the West, particularly the US, which is supportive of India's aspirations for the greater leadership role on the global stage or at the global level, because see, as of now only 5 countries have the UNSC permanent membership. I hope you knew what are those 5 UNSC permanent members. So please type those, mention those 5 UNSC permanent members in the comment section. So in fact, these UNSC 5 permanent members have the veto power that is being rejected for other countries. So despite India is one of the country which is eligible to get the permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council, but as of now India denied UNSC permanent seat, right? So India, despite being eligible to get a seat in the United Nations Security Council, so therefore India has been strongly demanding for the reforms of the UN, because UN is not reflecting the current realities. But for India's seat in the United Nations Security Council, US has been strongly supporting India's bid to get the permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council, right? So therefore US is supportive of India's aspirations for a greater leadership role on the global stage, and including backing India's bid for permanent seat on the UN Security Council. And apart from that, by positioning India as a democratic counterbalance to China authoritarian model, because very often China is considered as a totalitarian state, an authoritarian state. But on the other hand, India is a functional democracy and world's largest functional democracy. So West very often believes that India could counterbalance China's authoritarian state or totalitarian state, because India is a functional democracy. So thereby West also aims to strengthen India's influence in the international institutions, and that would help counter China in an effective manner. Remember, India has been strongly opposing Chinese frequent interference in India's neighbors and increasing its influence in India's neighborhood, and in fact its dominance has been growing in the Indian Ocean region, and India has been strongly opposing this. So therefore West is confident of India's ability to stand up to China. So there's also increase in the defense partnerships between India and Western countries. So with India has been purchasing the advanced defense systems from the US, France and Israel as well, right? So in fact we all knew that Rafale fighter jets have been purchased by India from US, right? So in fact a lot of fighter jet engine agreements, supply agreements are signed between India and US as part of initiative for critical and emerging technologies. And in fact with US we have a lot of defense partnership agreements, such as BECA agreement, Lemova agreement, and even COMCOSA agreement, right? So all these are different agreements that we have with US, and in fact with Israel also we have a lot of a lot of relations, a lot of friendly ties, and we have been purchasing radars and other defense equipments from Israel as well. So these partnerships are designed to enhance India's military capabilities, and it would also over a period of time aimed at reducing India's dependence on Russia's defense equipment. Because remember, if you look at India's total defense imports, so around 60 to 70% of the defense imports are from Russia alone, and on the other hand West don't want India to import these defense equipment from Russia. So because of that reason, West has also wanted to increase its influence or increase its relations, particularly the defense relations with India, so that India can move away from Russia's defense dependence. So therefore thus West has been aligning it closer with the Western strategic interests against China. So this is how you have to address this part of the answer, and ultimately you need to conclude the answer by suggesting the other appropriate way forward for India in the backdrop of growing India-China tensions. Okay. So this is how you have to provide an appropriate way forward or appropriate suggestion. So in this context, the West's fostering of India, or West's growing friendly relations with India, represents a significant political shift which has been balancing the economic interests with strategic imperatives in an evolving global landscape. Now, in the midst of India-China border tension, now as I've already told you that there have been India-China border tensions between India and China. So India's growing closeness with the West further strengthens India's ability to withstand Chinese aggression, and it also helps maintaining its dominance in the region, right? So this is how you have to address this particular questions. You have to answer this particular question. Remember, this is just a 150 word answer and you have to write this answer in 2 pages. So make sure that you mention as many points as possible in the answer within the prescribed word limit, and that will help you score a very good marks. So next very important question. So India's relations with the Central Asian region. So what is the Central Asian region? Now Central Asian region is the region which is between which is below the Russia and also above Afghanistan. So countries in the Central Asian region includes Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, so and Tajikistan as well. So all these countries are considered as Central Asian republics. Okay, so Central Asian republics, right? So I hope you knew about all these countries. So these are the Central Asian republics. Now previously the question was about the growing West and India relations in the backdrop of India-China tensions, but this question is about the India's relations with the Central Asian republics. So the question is, critically analyze India's evolving diplomatic, economic and strategic relations with the Central Asian republics, highlighting their increasing significance in the regional and global geopolitics, right? So this is the question. And so this is a very important question. So you have to give India's diplomatic, economic, strategic relations with the Central Asian region, and also you have to give some challenges that India has been facing when it comes to its engagement with the Central Asian republics. Now what should be the approach for this particular question? So this question has an approach. Now when it comes to the approach of this question, first and foremost you have to introduce this answer by providing a brief detail about India's relations with the Central Asian republics. Now what sort of a relations that India has been enjoying with the Central Asian republics, and then you have to mention the importance of Central Asian republics for India. Now, what is the importance of these Central Asian republics for India? And then you have to discuss India's evolving relations with the Central Asian republics in various aspects, diplomatic, economic and strategic dimensions. And then you have to discuss potential challenges for India in its engagement with Central Asian republics. So remember that the directive word is that critically analyze. So therefore in this context you have to discuss the potential challenges for India in its engagement with the Central Asian republics, and ultimately you need to conclude the answer by suggesting appropriate measures to strengthen India's relations with the Central Asian republics. Now, as I've already told you that you have to give a brief introduction about India's relations with the Central Asian republics. Now, in present times, the Central Asian republics constitute extended neighborhood of India. Now, when it comes to neighborhood of India, so we have immediate neighborhood and also extended neighborhood. So, for example, immediate neighborhood comes under immediate neighborhood. Pakistan is part of immediate neighborhood, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh. So these countries are part of India's immediate neighborhood, but on the other hand, extended neighborhood is Central Asian region. and Southeast Asian region, and also the Middle East. So all these countries are part of India's extended neighborhood, and in fact the Central Asian republics or republic region is also India's extended neighborhood. And in this context, security in the Central Asian region and stability and even prosperity of the Central Asian region is linked to India's security, India's stability, India's prosperity, India's development. So therefore, peace and security in the Central Asia is critical. It is very important for the peace and stability in India, and this is inextricably linked to peace in Afghanistan as well. So this is how you have to define the introduction. You have to write the introduction of how India has been engaging with why the Central Asian region is very important for India. So that is how you have to introduce this answer. And next part of the answer, you have to write the importance of the Central Asian republics for India. Now, what is the importance of the Central Asian republics for India? So firstly, we'll look into this from the political perspective. Now, political importance of the Central Asian republics for India. And in fact, when we talk about the political interests, India has a very wide array of interests in the Central Asian region, and those interests in the Central Asian region have been covering the dimension of security, energy, economic opportunities, etc. So remember that when it comes to security, there are certain threats that could emanate from the Central Asian region. Radicalization, Islamic fundamentalism, and this threat of ISIS, which is based in the Afghanistan and present Taliban threat. Right? So therefore, security of the Central Asian region, including Afghanistan, is very important for India to ensure security, stability in India and India's neighborhood. And apart from that, when we talk about the Central Asian region countries have immense resources. So those countries have immense mineral resources. For example, TAPI energy pipeline or gas pipeline. So this pipeline starts from Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan and India. So still this particular pipeline project is not yet fully implemented because of the disagreements and even the rule of Taliban in Afghanistan, and Pakistan not agrees to this particular pipeline, and a lot of economic opportunities because the Central Asian region is very well known for rich mineral resources. Okay, so because of that reason, India and the Central Asian region have a very good relations, and Central Asian region serves as a land bridge between Asia, Europe, making it geopolitically accessible for India. And in fact, security, stability and prosperity of Central Asia is imperative for peace and economic development of India as well. So in fact, India uses this Chabahar port, right? So Chabahar port, I would like to explain this port, Chabahar port. So you could see that this is a Gwadar port, which is part of China-Pakistan economic corridor that China has been developing in the Balochistan province of Pakistan. But on the other hand, we have the Chabahar port. Okay, so Chabahar port is a port which is located in Iran, and in fact this port has been developed by India in Iran to further enhance its access to Afghanistan and the larger Central Asian region. Remember that India usually got access to Afghanistan from this Jammu and Kashmir region, but Pakistan blocked India's access to Afghanistan. So since Pakistan blocked India's access to Afghanistan, India started exploring alternative ways to access Afghanistan, because before the Taliban coming into Afghanistan, so Afghanistan was under a democratic rule, and Afghanistan used to maintain, Afghanistan government and Afghanistan leaders used to maintain a close and friendly relations with India. So therefore, as part of an alternative route to Afghanistan and larger Central Asian region, India has started developing this Chabahar port, and these shipments would be first shipped to Chabahar port, and from Chabahar port, road and rail network is being built by India to Afghanistan. So this is how India used to access Afghanistan and larger Central Asian region. So therefore, in this context, so for India to use Chabahar as a vital gateway to access the Eurasian markets and also optimally operationalize its use, it requires Central Asian states joining the Chabahar port project as a direct stakeholders. That is very important. And when it comes to the economic relations between India and the Central Asian region, so this region is rich in mineral resources or natural resources, and in fact the Central Asian region has been endowed with resources such as petroleum, natural gas, antimony, aluminium, gold, silver, coal, uranium. So all these minerals are very, very important to ensure mineral security. To ensure mineral security for India and also ensure supply chain resilience. Also to ensure supply chain resilience for India. So Central Asian region is very important because India could potentially reduce its dependence on countries such as China and other countries in the region. So therefore, India could strengthen its strengthen access to the Central Asian region to explore or have access to these resources. And in fact, Central Asia has a huge cultivable area, and those cultivable areas in the Central Asian region are laying barren. They're not cultivated properly, and in fact India has a huge expertise when it comes to the cultivation, when it comes to agriculture. So therefore, India could use its expertise in the field of agriculture and produce crops which could be suitable to the agroclimatic regions of the Central Asian republics. So therefore, it offers enormous opportunity for the cultivation of the pulses, and as of now, India has been importing pulses to meet its domestic pulses demand from countries such as Tanzania and Mozambique. Right, so this would be another area of a close economic engagement between India and Central Asian countries. And in fact, the Central Asian republics are fast getting linked to the global markets for production, supplies of raw materials, and even services as well. And in fact, the Central Asian republics are also increasingly getting integrated into the East-West Trans-Eurasian transit economic corridors. Remember that there is international north-south transport corridor. So there is a corridor, international north-south transport corridor, and this corridor links India with the Central Asian region and to the even to the Russia and Eurasia as well. Right, so therefore, in this context, connectivity would improve in future, and that would help India explore all the opportunities in the Central Asian region. And in fact, the Central Asian region countries are also experiencing the highest levels of economic growth rate in recent times. And in fact, there are several areas that have become attractive for the construction, business, and in fact that has also been providing huge scope for the Indian companies engaging in the financial services, contractors, engineers, and management specialists. So these are the areas of economic importance of India and Central Asian region. And apart from that, we should also try to understand the strategic interests. right? So we should also try to understand the strategic interests. Now, what are the strategic interests? So as I've already told you that security is a strategic interest between India and the Central Asian region, and access to larger Eurasia is another strategic interest, and access to mineral resources, access to mineral resources is another strategic area, and increasing India's strong dominance or increasing India's presence, because as of now in the Central Asian republics there is a strong Chinese domination, right? So there is a strong Chinese domination, and in fact India is also part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, and SCO is being dominated by China, and Shanghai Cooperation Organization consists of most of these Central Asian republic countries. So therefore these are some of the strategic interests, but India Central Asian Republic relations are not free from the challenges. So there are a lot of challenges between India and Central Asian Republic countries and their relations. For example, terrorism is a challenge. A lack of adequate connectivity is also another challenge, and poor India's presence or inadequate focus of India in the Central Asian region is another major challenge, or inadequate investments of India in the Central Asian region is also another major reason. And apart from that, India's growing reluctance to be part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is also another major challenge. Okay, so the major challenge is instability, radicalization, and terrorism. And in this context, what are the other potential challenges? So there are obstructions of physical connectivity, because I have already explained that as of now Pakistan is hostile towards India. So it has been showing hostile attitude towards India in terms of its access to Afghanistan and Central Asia, and Afghanistan's instability because of Taliban and the terror organizations have been getting safe havens and shelters in Afghanistan. So that would be another major challenge for India's greater access to the Central Asian region. And in fact, so if we make a comparison between India's trade with China, so India's trade with a Central Asian region and China's trade with the Central Asian region. So China's trade with the Central Asian region is many times more than what India's trade with the Central Asian countries. So current trade volume with Central Asia is very minimal, and it cannot be increased without substantially improving the connectivity. So connectivity is a major challenge, and without having a proper connectivity, we cannot expect that India could have a good relations, or India could have a strong presence in the Central Asian region. Now another disadvantage when it comes to India's connectivity with the Central Asian republics is that all these Central Asian republics are landlocked countries. So that is a major disadvantage, being landlocked countries. So in fact, the Central Asian republics are highly fragile, and they are also facing regular threats from terrorism, Islamic fundamentalism, radicalization. So all these things have been making the region more and more volatile and unstable, because when India has been planning to have a permanent presence in the Central Asian region, when India has been planning to increase its investment and infrastructure in the Central Asian region, because of these threats, so India's investments, India's infrastructure becoming more and more vulnerable because of the volatility and instability that is prevalent in the region. Therefore, ultimately, in conclusion, stemming from its historical, cultural and economic bonds between India and Central Asian Republican countries, India is now well placed to take a more active role in the development of this Central Asian region. And India's growing global visibility and key contribution to the multilateral forums like Shanghai Cooperation Organization have catapulted India from an observer into a critical stakeholder in the region. Now, as of now, India has been looking beyond its borders. It not just limited itself to India's neighborhood, rather it has been looking away from its neighborhood towards the extended neighborhood, towards the larger region. Central Asia provides India with right platform to leverage its political, economic and cultural connections to play a leading role in the larger Eurasian region. Right, so that's how you can conclude this answer. So I hope you have understood this question. So next, a very important question, that recently a union government passed a bill, passed a legislation, I would say. The legislation was the Public Examination Prevention of Unfair Means Act of 2024. Okay, so in this context, because see, what is the reason for passing this Public Examination Prevention of Unfair Means Act 2024? See, recent instances of malpractices have taken place in exam. For example, there are allegations of NEET exam where malpractice, corruption takes place in this NEET examination. Not just NEET examination, there were a number of other exams as well, right? So there were a lot of allegations of this malpractices. So in this backdrop, the Union Parliament has passed the Public Examination Prevention of Unfair Means Act of 2024. Okay, so the question has been asking, what are the aims and objectives of this recently passed and enforced the Public Examination Prevention of Unfair Means Act 2024? And the second part of the question, whether university or state education board examinations too are covered under this act. Right, so this is the question. Now, what is the approach of this question? So right, this question should have a proper approach. Now, when it comes to the approach of this question, so first and foremost, you have to introduce this answer by mentioning what is Public Examination Prevention of Unfair Means Act of 2024 in the introduction itself, and then you need to discuss what are the aims and objectives of the Public Examination Prevention of Unfair Means Act 2024, and then mention whether university and state education boards examinations are covered under the act or not. You have to give some details, and ultimately you need to conclude the answer by writing the overall significance and the importance of such an act for India. So as I've already told you that in the introduction you have to briefly give details about this legislation. So the Public Examinations Prevention of Unfair Means Bill 2024 has been passed by the Parliament. Okay, so that was first introduced in the Lok Sabha to initiate, and in fact it is an initiative to address the menace of unfair means or malpractices in the public examinations. Right, so in fact there are a lot of allegations in recent times about these malpractices and unfair means being used in these public examinations. So they aimed at fostering transparency, fairness and credibility, and this particular bill is designed to serve as a model for the states across India to adopt and implement. Now in this context, we need to understand what are the aims and objects of the Public Examination Prevention of Unfair Means Act of 2024. Right, so it has certain aims and objectives, and in fact this is being asked in the question. Right, so in fact this particular legislation deals with the cases of question paper leakage in examination of question papers of exams, various exams. Right, so question paper leakage has become a common phenomenon in Indian examination system, and in fact it has stagnated the several recruitment tests as well. So whenever there are allegations of question paper leakage, and immediately those examination or recruitment process are being stagnated, and so a strict policy is necessary, and strict policies are needed for maintaining the sanctity of the examination process, right? So it is very important to protect the sanctity of the examination process. And in fact, this particular piece of legislation is also passed to ensure that malpractices have been delaying the examinations and recruitment processes. So we need to prevent these malpractices taking place. So unfair practices often lead to the cancellation or even postponement of the exams. They are adversely affecting the millions of candidates and disrupting their career trajectories as well. Okay, so they have been disrupting the career trajectories of the students. So this is the prime purpose of restoring confidence in the examination system, which calls for transparent, fair and credible conduct in public exams. And apart from that, so this particular bill is also intended to have a standard form through which states will be motivated to adopt a uniform measures in the fight against malpractices in the respective examination systems as well. Okay, so these are the basic aims and objectives of passing the public examinations prevention of the malpractices or prevention of such unfair practices act 2024. So the next part of the question is whether university or state education board examinations are covered under the act or not. So this would be the next part of the question. Now, a list of the examinations which are being covered by this particular legislations. Okay, so this act applies to examinations which are being conducted by the specified authorities, and these specified authorities including Union Public Service Commission, Staff Selection Commission, Railway Recruitment Board, National Testing Agency, Institute of Banking and Personnel Selection, and central government departments and attached offices for recruitment. University and State Education Board examinations are not explicitly mentioned in the list of covered examinations. However, the central government has the authority to notify additional examination authorities under the bill's purview. So if central government want, the power has been given to the central government to notify additional examinations which could be covered under this particular legislation's purview. And in fact, this legislations also aim to comprehensively address unfair practices in public examinations through prevention, punishment, and even improved accountability as well. So this is how you could conclude this answer, right? So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. So if you like our work, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.